All right. Thank you. I really enjoyed the presentation. And once again, we'll share that after the meeting with everyone. So if you like collect information from that, I know it has really good information on that presentation.
All right,
Oh,
thank you. And I'm going to go try and find a place that's not under a fire drill and watch and listen to everyone else talk.
okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Eric, I just made you a co-host and hopefully you will be able to share your screen.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and try that.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll jump on to next session to learn about hemp production. And Dr. Eric Walker, many of you already know him. He used to be our UT tobacco and hemp specialist, and now he is the Director of Science and Innovation with Genamera. Eric, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Okay, so Iris, what are you seeing right now on your screen? Does that look like a hemp field with the sun setting?
Very beautiful picture.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That a coworker took that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Walker, and I apologize for my scratchy throat and sneezes and coughing to come. The allergies hammered me pretty good. Um, yeah, so it's been a wild ride in Tennessee since the end of 2014. Denise did a great job with her presentation as she always does, and there's a lot of good information there. I encourage everyone to go back and look at that because it's very important and things change fast. And Tennessee has done a great job with the hemp program. Um, Annie Self and Katie Kilborn and others there also done a really good job. So we're going to talk about, I didn't even put it in my title here, but we're going to talk about agronomics this morning. I do work for Genamera now, and we are a hemp company that in 2019 we contracted with growers to produce hemp, and we did pay everyone upon delivery, which is something that didn't happen a lot of times, but we were able to do that. And then we contracted in 2020 last year again with growers, and prices were lower. Everybody got paid again. So, going to be talking about what I saw last year, and then some of the information that the growers submitted on their grower records. There's going to be some overlap with what Denise said, and I'm sure um, the following speaker and anything, but it's worth repeating. Now, the definition of hemp, according to the USDA final rule, is the plant species Cannabis sativa L and any part of that plant, including the seeds thereof, and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether grown or not, with a delta 9 THC concentration not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. Um, that's where that final rule is going. As Denise said, we have another season just looking at Delta 9, but eventually, and she can correct me, but this year we're going by Delta 9 only, and then next year it will be that total THC that we'll be looking at. So um, that's important. That gives us a little more flexibility in our state uh, this year with some of the varieties we can grow and harvest timing, because all of that affects Delta 9 THC. Another thing that's going on, just put in the back of your mind right now, in that second line, um, hemp is considered, it includes the seeds and then all derivatives, extracts, and cannabinoids, third line. Isomers, that's what the definition is, as long as the delta 9 is lower than 0.3%. The people in the hemp industry, some of the people out there growing, uh, have discovered that there's some derivatives, extracts, and there's some debate about whether it's derivatives, extracts, or whether it's synthesized that fall in this definition. And there's some new products out there that are being sold with some debate. And just going to mention that later on. So we've talked about the history in Tennessee. Here's just a little overview. And I know really the things around the information in the slide, it's just, you might could zoom in and see what those different things are. But hemp introduced to the United States in 1645. Hemp brought to Kentucky in 1775. And then, when this started in 2014, there was a lot of literature talking about how hemp was grown widely in the United States, and it was. And in 1840 through 1860, that 20-year period right before the Civil War, the hemp industry flourished. But then you see, and that was mainly for fiber and some grain. But in the late 1800s through 1912, the hemp industry declined, and that's because we were getting more. There were just more plant-based fibers that we had access through importation. And so, but then what happened, World War One, and there was a bump in acreage in 1917 due to World War One. After World War One, and you can see on your, if I don't know if you go back and enlarge, but after World War One, by 1933, there was a total of 140 acres of hemp in the state. So because there were other plant-based fibers we were getting from other countries like jute and abaca, if I'm saying that right, and some other things, cotton, the cotton gin changed things too, then there just wasn't as much demand for hemp. There were other products that fit the needs of some of the manufactured goods better than hemp. But then in 1943, or the beginning of World War One, or World War Two, excuse me, that supply chain was broken. And so we needed hemp again. And that's when we hit our peak of hemp production in 1943 with 186,700 harvested acres. You'll see differences, but that's the best number I could find at the time. So just under 200,000 harvested acres in 1943. And that was our biggest year. Then in 10 years later, after the war, supply lines opened back up, not enough hemp in the U.S. to even be recorded. That Hemp for Victory covered it up, but not enough to be recorded. And you may be able to see that. I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but on your right side, the table 98. I know that's small, but by 1958, there was just a small hemp fiber industry in Wisconsin, and then it pretty much disappeared for the last 60 years in the United States. A small experimental plot in Hawaii of a quarter acre, and then the Agricultural Act or the Farm Bill of 2014 legalized hemp in states with a pilot program. There were some changes in the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, or that Farm Bill. Then we had the interim final rule that established the Domestic Hemp Production Program. We had that in 2019, and then 2020, the final rule was issued. So exciting times, but we've had a lot of changes just since 2014 to now, and I think we'll continue to see it. When we started out in 2014, 2015, I know the University of Tennessee Tennessee Department of Ag and a lot of other states had a lot of hemp meetings. And then really, I know the only hemp production on my radar at the time, just based on history in other countries, was either for fiber. That's what you see, the black and white, and it's the backdrop for all these slides. And that was a picture out of an old publication by Lester Dewey, The Cultivation of Hemp in the United States, a good source of early agronomic data. Then there's also hemp for grain. And if you look at that picture in your bottom right, if you drove by that today, you know, it looks like somebody cutting soybeans. So with any of this, that's fiber production in the middle right, grain production in the lower right. That's large scale production. There was a good paper that came out of the University of Kentucky, I believe, in 2014, an economic paper. At the time, they looked at hemp as grain or fiber, or a dual purpose crop of grain and fiber from the same crop. And it had net returns similar to corn, soybean, or wheat if the market was there. And that's great for a row crop farmer who has that kind of equipment, but those returns are relatively low returns per acre. That's why we see row crops producers, they don't have 5 or 10 acres of corn or soybean, or in Canada, or now in Kentucky in places, hemp for fiber or grain. We don't have 5 or 10 acres. Usually we'll have, hundreds of acres, sometimes thousands of acres, because the returns are comparably low compared to a crop like tobacco or vegetables. But there were some, as we went on, there were some pretty innovative folks that looked at that definition of hemp and saw that it left room for other things besides Delta 9. By definition, there's not uh, very much Delta 9, not enough to cause any psychoactive response in hemp, but there are other cannabinoids that hemp could be, where hemp could be grown, and you could grow hemp for these cannabinoids or terpenes. And they're contained in the cannabis resin. And cannabis resin is just like gum, it's sticky. And it's in the trichomes. So the trichomes are leaf hairs, or really, you'll hear about cannabis, you'll hear about the bud or the cola, that's the flower. And that's where we're interested in, that is in female plants. So, whether you're talking about marijuana or cannabis or hemp, for cannabinoid production, uh, during this time, and that was probably, to the best of my memory, that was kind of like 2018 when people were really um, making this known. They were using all female plants, which were from either feminized seed, where the seed had um, maybe one male in 3,000 plants, and the rest of them were female if it was good feminized seed, or they were clones. So they were cuttings taken from a female plant. Those cuttings were rooted, grown into small plants, and transplanted. And then they were grown for those colas or buds. And in the magnification at the top, you can see those trichomes. The reason the buds, the colas, are of more interest is that that's where the trichomes are concentrated in the highest densities. So there's trichomes, there's some on the leaf, on the stem, but if you look under a microscope, they're sparsely populated, whereas the buds, the colas, those trichomes are densely populated. And in those trichomes, the resin is produced. That's where your cannabinoids are. So that's where the value is in hemp for extract or hemp for cannabinoids. And the main cannabinoid that was talked about in 2018, 2019 was CBD, or cannabidiol. And here's some pictures just of what hemp production looked like in Tennessee. I think most of these were taken in 2019, maybe 2018, but we're looking at either bare ground production, like on the bottom, that was in Hawkins County in East Tennessee, or we're looking at on plastic. And just for example, the You see the tobacco rolling scaffolds in the background on the left of your screen, and the hemp on white in front of those rolling scaffolds on white plastic. So either a tobacco or tomato production models kind of combined with the marijuana production model. And a lot of this was done outdoors. People that were familiar with growing tobacco or produce did a really good job. They used a tobacco setter sometimes or a water wheel in the plastic, hand harvest a lot of tobacco barns or sheds or greenhouses or structures were used to dry that hemp. Just another, excuse me, picture. And that was some trials, I believe, in 2020 at the UT Greenville station, where we were looking at nitrogen fertility in the front. And in the back, we had a large variety trial. So, before we go on, cannabidiol was popular because it has since been developed into a pharmaceutical, Epidiolex, and Epidiolex is hemp-derived cannabidiol that has been shown in some people to reduce the number of seizures in some people with conditions that have that. It's been effective. It's also uh, been effective in some other things, and it is, you'll see it widely available in tinctures or gummies, smokable hemp in the states that it's allowed. In Tennessee, it is. And CBD was really driving this. Since then, there's been some other cannabinoids of interest. People are looking at terpenes now. So now moving into your plans. So if you're thinking about growing hemp in 2021, this is you need to get really busy about. There's still time to plant. I think there's plenty of time. I think to locate clones or feminized seed and plant the crop, but you need to be doing a lot of other things first, and you have a lot of considering to do. Denise did a great job, and there's a great resource, the Tennessee Department of Ag. What are the current laws and rules for hemp production and marketing? I would start with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and call them if you don't see something you need. They're great. Make sure you're legal. As Denise mentioned, what are your goals for the crop? You really need to know that, and there's all kind of goals. Um, is it to make money? Is that what your goal is, or you do right now? Do you just want to enjoy the crop, learn about the crop, learn how to grow the crop better? That makes a difference. Also, are you going to be growing fiber? What are you going to be growing grain? Are you going to be growing hemp for cannabinoids like CBD or the other cannabinoids that they're looking at are terpenes? And how are you going to do that? A big consideration is how much will it cost to produce the hemp, harvest the hemp, and cure the hemp? And closely related to that, what honestly assess yourself and the people you'll be working with. What skills are needed? What equipment? What supplies? And supplies, that's anywhere from plants or seed, fertility, pesticides, and there's a very small group of pesticides that you can use. What kind of labor? It is labor intensive. You're going to need buildings or something to dry and store that hemp, or structures, land, and then it takes a lot of time depending on your scale. Um, so, what will be needed to achieve your goals? And then, where are you going to get that if you don't have it? And do you have time to line all that up? So, those are some things you need to be thinking about. If you want to sell your hemp for profit, you need to have a marketing plan. And One thing we learned from especially 2019 and 2022 and even now is a known reliable customer who can pay you in a timely manner is imperative to selling this stuff and making a profit or breaking even. Um, there were a lot of contracts out there in 2019. That was when it really boomed. In late 2018, some people made really good numbers. Not everybody, but there were a few that made a lot of money on hemp in 2018. They had contracts for CBD. It was great. So in 2019, that's the information we had. We tried to stress that everybody wouldn't make that kind of money, but there was potential for some. There were a lot of people that offered contracts in 2019. A lot of those contracts were not offered, and there is a lot of 2019 hemp still in storage right now in barns and warehouses and buildings. So if you have a contract, if you're looking for a contract, if you get one, how good is that contract? Some of them don't look that good. Some of them look really solid, and both good looking contracts and poor looking contracts. A lot of them were not upheld in 2019. So, really consider, if you're going in with a big investment, really consider involving a lawyer to take care of yourself, because I was naive. I didn't realize that contracts were so easy to break. Apparently, I know a lot of people that uh, grew hemp and it wasn't honored. So just because somebody gets a contract doesn't mean that that it's going to come to fruition. So just be really careful. Another thing I want to stress is um, the hemp crowd, and we fit into that. Anybody on this fits into the hemp crowd. Um, is one of the most passionate groups I've ever seen. When I was with UT and going to the meetings, they're very excited, very passionate, and that's a great thing, because passionate groups get a lot of things done. And we had a lot of progress, and we're still making a lot of progress. One thing that can be bad about passion, though, or emotion, is it can kind of, if it's not kept in check, it can kind of keep you separated from reality and facts. And sometimes it's easy for us to go with that emotional. We want it to work. We're excited about it. It's hemp, it's cannabis, and we really don't want to hear the facts that we don't like. But there's still facts. And for this, when it's your money involved and your time involved, you really need to rely on facts. Don't give up on your dream, but rely on facts when you're making decisions, and verify those sources of information. Fact check everything, including anything that I've said here. I encourage it. Okay, budgets. Right now, look at budgets. So good hemp budgets, really good hemp budgets are available. Iris and Aaron Smith have done an excellent job with UT in developing hemp budgets. There's a publication that you can access. And there's also, and Iris can give you information on that, but there's also workable Excel spreadsheets where you take their budget, you put in your plant cost or your seed cost, or what labor it's going to take you, change it, what your contract or what your plans for selling are, the profitability, and then it gives you a budget specifically to your operation, and then also a return table that you can look at where, at what price is it going to not be profitable, what's break even, and what's the profit going to be. So a great tool. And then the manage program has been around with UT for a long time. Back in '99, when I was an extension agent in Obion County, We worked with some managed agents with poultry and row crops, and it's really an amazing, good tool. So reach out to UT to see if this is a viable operation if you're going large scale. And then Tyler Mark with the University of Kentucky also did a really good budget that's Excel based. All right. So in 2020, this was the information that I shared at a meeting. So industrial hemp market was projected to grow from $46 billion in 2019 to $26 billion in 2025. Snacks and cereal estimated as the largest market share in 2019. Uh, in this forecasted period, it looks like there's a lot of optimism for hemp fiber, and I'm optimistic about hemp fiber. And there's some things going on. There's some encouraging developments, but it's just going to take time. It's new. Europe was projected as the largest market share during the forecasted period, and that's Vote Hemp source, and that's also a good source to look at. Uh, Consumers, they're going to want traceability, and that's something that our companies tried to do, and other companies are doing as well, where you can look at where that seed originated from there to where was it grown, where was the plant grown, where was it processed, all the way to the consumer. And I think that's going to be critical for the success of hemp, especially with cannabinoids. Baby boomer consumption, I think, continues to escalate, and then other cannabinoids were forecasted in the future. CBN was one. One thing we saw at the end of 2019 and in 2020, we're still looking at CBD, but there was a big push for CBG for the 2020 crop. And we were seeing prices a lot higher than CBD in the same pattern as we saw it for CBD when it started. Like CBD, we really overproduced in 2019. 2020 felt the impact from that. So there was a focus on CBG. There was some CBG genetics. Some people have done good with that. I would just be cautious with that. Again, be sure of your market. And then the final source, 28% of US adults consume CBD, and 17% purchased a product in 2018, 2019. That's what I shared in 2020. Earlier this year, um, kind of the current situation as I see it, and I look forward to the following speaker talking about the current situation. But many are optimistic about cannabis in 2021. I am too, but I'm, that then it's still kind of an unknown for hemp. I know this year extraction. We're extracting. Our company is extracting crude extract from the hemp that we produced in 2019 and 2020, and we have plenty of inventory, and this is a new industry. So some of the equipment that we have, we still have bugs, and it's been slow. So in 2021, we are not contracting any hemp production with producers. So I know there's a few acres there that won't be represented by our production. Um, how will legalization of medical and recreational cannabis in different states affect the hemp industry? I think that's something to think about, because with legalization of medical and recreational cannabis, um, you can get the same cannabinoids that we're getting in hemp, um, in cannabis that's not limited by that hemp definition of 0.3% delta 9. So I don't know what that's going to do. But that's something to watch. There's predictions for more market stability for CBD in 2021, relatively small but stable hemp grain market, and optimistic outlook on hemp fiber. I don't know what 2021 holds for hemp. For our company, we're committed. We're doing it, but we're watching too. It is rapidly changing industry. It's a new industry, even though we produced hemp a lot in a long time ago. The way we're producing hemp now, most of our acres is completely new. And so we just don't have that data set and tools that, when our other major crops were developed, none of us were born. And so the research had been done, the recommendations had been formed by the time we were born, and it was a well-oiled machine for corn and cotton and soybean and wheat and cattle and all of these things. And right now it's just going to take time, and we don't have that data set. We don't have those recommendations. It's going to take time and money before hemp is running as a well-oiled machine. But we have really good people, passionate people that's working at it. The Hemp Alliance of Tennessee was mentioned. That's a really good source of information. I'd encourage, if you're interested in, I'd encourage you to be involved with them. The Tennessee Hemp Growers Coalition, and Joe Kirkpatrick there, who is involved with the Hemp Industries Association and now involved with that, does a great job of keeping all of us informed of what kind of legislation is going on nationally and in the state. So a great resource. Hemp derivatives have shifted some focus to other products. This is something that's really, really, I noticed it this year more than anything else, and maybe the end of last year. And what I'm speaking about is Delta 8 THC. So when I mentioned that, CBD, initially we were looking at grain and fiber in 2014, 2015, 2016. And then hemp for CBD came out. It's a different way of growing. We were looking at cannabinoids, female plants. Well, um, that in that hemp definition of derivatives, extracts of cannabis, as long as that cannabis is less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC, um, then that's permitted. There's a debate now, and right now, one of those products is Delta 8. Delta 8 is naturally occurring in cannabis. It is psychoactive. It is, they say it's not as psychoactive as Delta 9 THC, but it is psychoactive. It's produced in very, very, very small concentrations within the hemp plant naturally. So now, what appears to be kind of driving this part of this industry anyway, this hemp industry, is the CBD is being converted to Delta 8 THC and being sold. And so the shift, at least uh, with within one part of the hemp industry, it's shifted away from the end product being CBD. There's still a big, active, uh, profitable CBD market for some people. But for other folks, they've shifted their focus on producing Delta 8 THC in those products. And there are some legality debates in language. Is it a derivative? Is it extract? Or is it synthesized? And that makes all the difference to DEA. So right now, that's way above me. And lawyers are figuring that out, and there will be a ruling. So just something to be aware of. We've seen attrition in the industry. Some commitments are not honored, and then there's short-term versus long-term players. So I think there's there's going to be a market for hemp products. I'm excited about what's coming for hemp fiber, and I think, based on what I've seen for hemp grain and hemp food products, animal feeds, there's going to be a market there. And then for cannabinoids, I think there's going to be a market. There's going to be a long-term viable hemp industry, but it's going to take time. And what it looks like now is not what it's going to look like in the future. It's going to look different we said it was going to look different last year and the year before, and it's looking different every year. And this year looks different than last year. Last year looks different than 2019, and you can go all the way back to that table. It's just going to have a different look. It's going to have to settle out. So it's unknown at this point who the long-term players are going to be, the size of the industry, where it settles, and what the market looks like. So most of that stuff's beyond your control. So when we talked earlier about your considerations, what your goals are, making sure you have a market if you want to sell, control what you can, figure out where you fit in, and I think there is a spot for you. Be careful, be smart, be measured on scale, and do your homework. Okay, agronomics. There's limited research verified information. It's a new crop again, and research takes time and it takes funding dollars. And if there's no funding, there's no research to the scale we need. Thankfully, USDA is funding hemp research now. There's a lot of good research being done in Tennessee. University of Tennessee and other universities in Tennessee, the University of Kentucky, other universities in Kentucky and other states. The University of Tennessee has published some information on hemp variety trials. That was 2019. It was mentioned earlier that Dr. Hansen was on. He's done a great job, along with other pathologists, on hemp disease and pest management. There's a lot of good information on insects now with what Dr. Grant, Scott Stewart, and then others in other states are doing. Dr. Frank Hale in Tennessee. There's good information. I would try to go to that government. I would try to make your base university and government related information, but don't discount private industry. There's information out there too that's good. There's what the websites for UT, University of Kentucky, and NC State look like. You can just Google those universities and add hemp to it, and you can find that. And then Murray State, they have some scientific articles about it. So with hemp, it's relatively easy to grow from transplanted clones or seedlings. That's what you'll be, more than likely, you'll be looking for clones, female clones, or seedlings from feminized seed. And then if your agronomic practices are sound, it's relatively easy to grow. Some notes though, you want a proven source of hemp seed clones or seedlings. It's absolutely critical. That the variety trials are absolutely necessary, but it's still the Wild West out there. And just because you have variety A and your neighbor has variety A, if they come from two different sources, they may or may not be the same plant. They may look completely different. So it's really tricky out there. If you can go with companies that have offered hemp clones or feminized seed or seedlings that were good in the previous years, if you can go with them, that's what I would encourage you to do. Unlike what we first heard about hemp can be planted in any kind of ground, poor ground, it's not true. It will grow in poor ground, it just won't grow well. So you need fertile, well-drained soil, as clean as you can of weeds. What we've seen with our producers, avoid rocky red ridges and wet-natured, poorly drained sites. It doesn't, excuse me. I've seen it do good in rocky red ridges, but I've also seen it not do well. So if you have deeper soil, more fertile soil, I would go with that. And then hemp does not like wet areas. So wet natured, poorly drained sites, stay away. Medium pH, 6 to 7, 6 to 6.5 is best. Tobacco or tomato production model works. Tobacco fertility works, and studies are being conducted. And again, it's going to take a long time. We did a nitrogen study and we saw similar levels from anywhere from, as in when I was with UT, we did one at Greenville, and it was 0 to 200 pounds per acre of nitrogen. And the way small plot research works, sometimes, we put that in as good a site as we could following tobacco. Tobacco gets a lot of nitrogen, and we had pretty similar yields and from all nitrogen rates. But most hemp is not produced in the very best soil. So, that 150 to 200 pounds, I think, I personally think 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre is too much, but that 150 pounds per acre, probably too much. But, if you're committed to this, you don't want to go too low. So that's some good research that'll it's being done now, and it'll continue to be done, but it's going to take time before those recommendations are out there. Hemp for extracts, it can go anywhere from 500 to over 3,000 plants per acre, depending on what your clone or seedling price is, which is probably at a minimum going to be $2 to maybe $4 per plant. That's a big cost. So depending on your scale, um, and what you have, there's not labeled herbicides out there. So your weed control is a clean site and tillage, and then hopefully canopy closure. But tillage can be critical. Plastic, that's one reason plastic and mowing works good. So whatever your deck width is, or whatever you can do to control weeds on the seat of a tractor or a lawnmower, or pushing a tiller or following a tiller before you have to get a hoe out, do that. So row spacings, plant spacings will vary depending on your operation. The transplant window, anywhere from May to July. We've seen some transplanted in August do well. Um, but eventually, rainfall patterns are going to catch us. And if you look at the rainfall patterns, it gets dry in July, August, September, and we're going to need irrigation. It's worked out pretty good the last few years, but the ability to irrigate is recommended. Weeds, insects, diseases, and then get your male plants out, or female plants can hermaphrodite and produce seed. We don't want seed if it's hemp for cannabinoids. So start scouting early, stay ahead. If you can, scout every day, especially when that hemp flowers. Okay, agronomics, it's mainly hand harvest. There are some machines out there, but mainly hand harvest, like tobacco for most. Most of the time it's whole plant harvest, and then you hang it up, similar to like we do with dark and burley tobacco. We've seen plants hung in tobacco barns, curing structures, and they dried really well. Sheds, like an open shed, or put in greenhouses, that's done really good too if the plants were kind of loosely piled into greenhouses, not packed, but loosely laid in greenhouses with dry floors. With if the light's coming in, um, it can bleach that hemp out where it's not green, but it dries well. The effect on on the cannabinoids for extraction, I guess, to be determined. Warehouses, we've seen it in that. The key, one of the biggest problems we saw last year was late harvest or late season molds in the bud, and then post season or post harvest molds when you're drying it. So when you're drying your crop, space those plants out. It takes a lot of room, a lot of barn space, a lot of greenhouse space to dry that hemp without it molding. You have to have ventilation, and fans are help so much, critical to excuse me, keep those post-harvest molds at bay. And you need an area to dry that buck material and possibly store. If you have to store that before it's delivered to your customer, you need to know that. We hear about dryers, we hear about green chop. Overall, that hasn't worked out as good as we were hoping. So have a backup, with that backup being a place and a method to dry those plants. Uh, Proper storage, again, is critical. controlling that humidity to prevent post-harvest molds. They're a tremendous problem. Again, just we have a humid environment, and so it's tough. And the indica, the big, pretty colas and buds are the worst ones about getting those. Even late last season in the field, when you kind of open those colas up, you could see some mold, some of those threads, kind of cottony look down in that, and that's a bad thing. So many questions from there's just some of the issues that you can look at in these pictures. Most of those issues, going at the top, the second picture, thrips and russet mites and broad mites, they can devastate, especially an indoor crop or a greenhouse. Moving on, weeds, you have to control weeds or your crop won't make it. Hemp leaf spot, we see that in the middle row of pictures, and that can devastate certain varieties. And again, that's why you need to go with a reliable source of varieties, because it changes. The chimera, the different colored plants, that was mainly, I think, aesthetics. It's not something you want in a crop unless it's ornamental, but it wasn't widespread. Um, the lower, first of all, about flowering, you're just going to see some yellowing of mature leaves. That's just something hemp does, but Dr. Richmond and others will help you with that when you see it. But I guess when it starts to flower and you see some old leaves yellowing, don't panic, don't discount it. Check it out, but don't panic. It's something cannabis does. Southern blight looks terrible. Southern blight, your plant will look good, and then one day it'll be completely wilted, like the second picture on the bottom, and then you may see, this cottony and granular fungal growth at the base of the stalk, and that plant's going to die. And it's so quick and so visually stunning. You may panic, but it's usually just a few plants here or there. Corn earworm will devastate a crop. You have to get good control of that. And then last year we had some kind of hemp leaf drop that we saw in several varieties. And that's the worst disease I've seen so far, because we went from beautiful crops with great colas developed. And then even in crops that were spaced out, that plant would just the leaves would start dying at the bottom of the plant and move up. So I'm going to focus on those first. Variety selection. That's the picture up there. It looks like a couple of different plant types. It's not very uniform. Again, find a supplier who's been doing it for a while and whose growers have good results. It's imperative. Cutworms, or not cutworms, excuse me, corn earworms will devastate the crop. So there's not many products to use. The best results we saw with our growers last year, worked with Dr. Scott Stewart and Dr. Grant, Dr. Katie Britt, a Tennessee alumni, and also Dr. Hannah Barak at NC State, trying to figure these corn earworms out. And Heligen and Gemstar, which is a virus that you spray on that infects the corn earworms, and then they die. The feeding slows, and they just turn to like a slime and decompose, and then their bodies are a source of more of that virus to spread. They work pretty well, but it's not a residual product. It's not going to last long. So those worms need to consume that product within, I'm shooting from the hip a little bit here and going from memory, but they really need to consume that product about in the day following it's applied. But if the worms are out there, they will. The best results we saw, and there'll be recommendations, and Dr. Hanson will speak better to this and may disagree with what I said, but the best results we saw with Heligen and Gemstar was to, when it started flowering, just start spraying, and spray every week or 10 days, because once that corn earworm gets, once that cola grows and kind of encapsulates that worm, and they're actually feeding down deep into the cola, and not on the actual part of the plant that's being sprayed, those worms are going to get too big to control. So if you can start early, spray regular, we saw the best success there. Some people sprayed dipel. It didn't work good, and that's consistent with kind of the corn earworm populations now. It's a BT. BT didn't work well. Agree is another BT combination, or a different strain of BT. It seemed to work a little better, in the literature's out there that shows a little better efficacy on corn earworm, but it didn't work well. So the best products were Gemstar and Heligen. They come in, unless they've changed something this year, they come in large containers, like either a gallon or a 2.5 gallon container. Those containers are expensive. You probably won't need very much. So if you can find some other growers to go in with, share the cost and split it up, it works better. And then this in the lower right corner, this leaf drop disease. I don't know if it's, there was some different pathogens that were isolated. Dr. Hansen, again, you can ask him about that, Dr. Heather Kelly and others. But if you look in the top left, look for reference, look at the green barns. This is what we saw. So on the left side of your screen, the crop looks great, great. Um, Driving by it, but then you see a couple of plants that don't look as good, and they're starting to and there was some hemp leaf spot out there, but in the bottom, um, it was starting to defoliate and the leaves were drying up. And then if you squat down, everything looks great on top, but in the bottom, the leaves are dying, just moving up the plant. Well, then in a week or two, look at your middle pictures. You can, when you're walking out there, you don't have to squat down. You can see that progression of the disease is moving up the plants. And then a couple of weeks later, in your top right corner, that's where there was no value left. It completely annihilated that crop. They bush hogged it. There was just stems. And you can see in those pictures, if you look closely, in some of the colas are dying too. In this particular field, there were 3 varieties side by side. One variety got it the worst. It was bush hog. By the time it was harvested, the variety that you see in your top right corner, there wasn't a lot of value left. It went to the barn, but there wasn't much there. And then there was another variety that was untouched by it. And we saw that throughout the year, very variety specific. But again, if you get your varieties from, your variety A, again, may not be this person's variety A, because it's just the Wild West out there. So um, yeah, I hope it's not a problem like it was last year, but it was devastating. That and post harvest molds were our worst problem last year. The year before, the worms were. So wrapping up, it's a new crop again. Um, it's been gone for a long time. There's a lot of work to do. Look to history and other crops as we approach the future. It's already happening. Just look at all our other crops. It happened there. There's going to be increases in scale, efficiency, production. The prices per unit are going to go down eventually till they stabilize. There has been consolidation, integration, globalization, other countries doing it. And then eventually, we don't see corn grown in every state. We don't see cotton grown in every state, rice in every state. We don't even see cattle or pasture grown to the same scale in every state. So it's going to be the same with hemp. Some regions are just going to break out as better suited to hemp production. It's going to become evident. I don't know where that's going to be. We can grow good hemp in Tennessee and Kentucky, but we do have a problem with pest pressure and humidity. So we'll see how genetics and breeding and environment work together with that. Hemp is not emus. It's not prawns. It's not switchgrass. It's not a passing fad. Um, hemp, hemp is here to stay. And again, I think fiber, um, will grow and grain will grow. And I think there will be a cannabinoid market. Too much money's at stake. There's too much public and political support. So cannabis, we know, is here to stay now, and hemp is too. There are immediate needs and strategic needs that are being met. It is evolving. Production practices are changing. Again, it's going to look different this year, next year, the year after. You'll see it evolve. Um, what else? Just the summary. You can read these points later. Don't let optimism cause you to make bad judgments. Go fact based, verify everything. Just because information is spread confidently, there's no shortage of confidently spread bad information in hemp right now. So, confidence does not mean true. So, fact check everything. It's expensive and risky, but there is a place for you. Just be measured. Um, and then the biggest challenge is not growing a good crop. You can grow good hemp if you're agronomically sound and you get good varieties and you control weeds. And there's extension out there and people who want to help. You're going to grow a good crop if the environment cooperates and you're sound. The hardest part is selling the crop for a good price and then getting paid for it, and being paid in a timely manner. So that's where I would spend my focus. That's all I have. Probably talked too long, Iris. So I'm going to back out here. I'm going to escape and try to figure out how to share my screen. I mean, get off the screen share.
Thank you, Eric, for returning to UT and just do a really valuable session production. And it's so interesting to see those pictures where I don't think I ever seen a leaf drop, and hopefully not, but that is something just so interesting to see. And Genamera has been one of the few really reliable processor that has been contracting and honoring their contracts in the past few years. And it's so interesting to know that you're not contracting this year. My question for you is like, is there some reason for that decision?
Yes, there is. We, excuse me, we contracted in, just to give you, let's see, I started Genamera in late 2019, and we had contracted the 2019 crop, and we were setting up our extraction facility, and we got all that equipment in except for some critical components. And it's not just the production side of hemp that's new, but it's also the extraction, the mechanization, the different processes, and some of the parts that that were needed were delayed in the building and the shipment. So we were behind on processing, and then when we got everything put together, it didn't it didn't work as efficiently um, as it was supposed to. So we had to have new components built that were bigger, and just those delays have pushed us back from processing. So we still have some 2019 inventory, and also all of our 2020 inventory to turn into crude extract. And so we've got to go through biomass inventory and get rid of that before. We don't want any more coming in and just building up faster than we can get rid of it. So we're going to take a year off and evaluate, and we hope to be out there contracting in 2022. So I'm interested in how much hemp that will be grown in Tennessee and other states. I still think it'll be a lot, but that's where we're at.